This is a memory of mine when I was around 5 or 6 years old. Around the summer of 2003 to 2004, my family and I would always go to Lake Fen to have fun over there. My mom would go and hang out and chat with her Hmong friends, while my dad would go play volleyball or play cards with the other Hmong men. Usually, my other brothers and I would go and play around the island, the middle section that we called the island. One time, while my brothers and I were playing near the south end of the island where that one tree is slanted and kids climb on it, I was alone exploring. I went to where that picnic table hut was. Nobody else was around and I was just doing whatever I was doing. So then I got bored and went to the shore of that side of the island and started picking cattails. I was looking down in the water, but something caught my eye. I wasn't sure of what it was, but it looked like a giant reptile leg resting. You know how in pictures you see a dragon resting and their legs are curled up like cats? Yeah, the legs were attached to its body, but I couldn't see the rest of it because it was covered by this greenish yellow thing that stays on top of the surface. The legs were covered in shiny green scales with 4 toes that had sharp, long, golden claws. I wasn't sure of what the heck I just saw, but I got excited. I don't know why I didn't get scared. I searched the grass to see if there was a rock or a pebble, but nothing. I then tried picking cattails and throwing it in, but, they just floated on top of the water. I was yelling to my older brother, who was just a year older than I was, but he couldn't hear me. I got irritated that he didn't hear me, so I felt like running to go get him, but I didn't want to leave fearing that that thing would be gone. I took a chance and brought my older brother, but when we came back, it was gone. I told him, "I'm serious, I saw a dragon there." I was furious because he never believed me. Later we left and went home. When I got home, I had all sorts of stupid imaginations like, what if I did throw the rock and it irritated the dragon, making it come out of the water and attacking everyone? I also imagined a group of shamans battling the dragon and thought that I was being too imaginative. To this day, I still don't know what I saw that day, so you can believe whatever you want. I lived in the area around the neighborhood of Lake Fen in St. Paul, Minnesota. The house that we lived in was small, long, and narrow, not wide at all. But it did have a big backyard with a small garage in the back. Between the house and the garage was a gap of grass that was perfectly shaped like a square. There was also a sidewalk that took you to the backyard. On the last day of loading our stuff into the car prior to moving out of that house, I saw something that I don't think I was supposed to see. By the garage on the side of where the grass was, I saw 2 medium firewood logs and 2 big baby footprints. I have heard from the elders that if you saw those footprints, you should run home as quickly as possible and never look back. I was also told that they were invisible, but even though they are invisible to our eyes, they are standing right in front of us. I was gonna run back from where I was standing at quite a distance, but I'd rather just drive my car back to my house than run inside from the driveway instead. While I was running, making my way to the car, I could hear the cry of a baby. Luckily, I made it out of there safely. If you want to know where this house is, it's on Geranium Avenue near Lake Fen. Google it if you're ever curious and want to see the baby ghosts. They are still there, I can assure you. It's located in the backyard between the garage and the house. When I was around 11 years old, my half-cousins, my little sister, and I slept over at my uncle's old house near Lake Fen. Like most kids do, we played hide-and-seek in the dark, but in the basement because there was a lot of space. In the basement, there were 2 mattresses on the ground next to each other, and it was at the end of the room. Everywhere else was spaced. When we played, usually we ran around in the dark and hid on the mattresses. Then it was my turn to find them. I turned around, counted to 10, and turned off the lights. I turned back and everything was pitch black and very quiet. I went straight to the mattresses because everybody always hid there. Right when I got to the mattress, I held out my hands and felt someone. "I found you," I yelled, but no one replied. I pulled their hair really hard and rubbed my hands on the person's face. It didn't scream or even move. That person just sat still. I was freaked out and ran to turn on the lights really fast. When I did, everyone was on the side of the wall. No one was on the mattress. My face was just blank, looking at the mattresses. From the expression on my face, they knew that something was wrong. That's kinda creepy, not gonna lie. Interested in sharing your stories? Submit them to HmongChronicles@gmail.com or in the description below. Here is the next story. Thank you. My younger brother, Thu, at age 7, started to tell my parents that he did not want to grow older. He wanted to remain his age. This wasn't something uncommon for kids to say to their parents. However, he would repeat this to them daily. It was like he woke up one day with this idea and continued to repeat it for the next 6 months. I can still hear my brother. The way he said it to my parents was in a mature, grown-up kind of way, as if he was hinting something to them. We just didn't know it then. That day, I was fishing with my dad by the marina. My mom was watching my brothers by the playground area. This area was surrounded by the riverside. It had a nice trail next to the water with benches and playgrounds for kids. Unfortunately, I wasn't catching anything, so I grabbed my fishing pole and decided to head towards the playground. When I got closer to the playground, I could see my mom sitting on one of the benches near the water. One of my brothers was underneath the slides, but I couldn't see Thu anywhere. I walked up to my brother and asked him where was Thu. He said that the last time he saw Thu was by the lake close to where Mom was. I then walked over to the bench where my mom was sitting. I called out to her, but she didn't answer me. Once I got to the bench, I tapped her shoulder and asked her where Thu was because I was going to go to the other side and promised I'd take him along with me. When I saw my mom, she was pale and in a daze. Once I touched her, she jumped and the colors quickly came back to her face. I asked her again where was Thu. She said that he was playing by the water. I looked around and asked where exactly. My mom then said that he was just right there. She was watching him right there. The both of us were now calling out for him. No answer and nowhere in sight. This went on for about 5 minutes before I ran to get my dad. We called out and looked for my brother everywhere, but there was no sign of him. My dad ran to my uncle's house. They lived about 5 blocks down from the park and told them to call 911. Within minutes, there were several cops on the search for my missing brother. That night, we found out that my brother had drowned. I cried in disbelief that my brother was gone. Those who have loved loved ones know this feeling. Nothing seems right. You're a walking zombie and there's nothing anyone can say or do to make things right. Our upstairs neighbor was Laotian, and they came down and said something to my parents and relatives. My parents cried out loud. She told them that my brother wanted to come inside his house, but he can't because of the protections that we have in the living room. Most Hmong houses have this. She told my parents that it was his time. He chose to go. He is now living with the dragon that lives in that large body of water, and he will never grow old. My dad was angry with my mom for not watching my brother better. My mom swears she was on the bench watching my brother maybe about 5 feet away. The next thing that she could recall was me tapping her shoulder. The elders and shamans and all the uncles believed that the dragon mesmerized my mom in order to take my brother. They distracted her, made her forget all about my brother, forget what she was doing, blanked out her memory for a brief period until they got my brother into the water. My mom never truly forgave herself. 2 years afterwards, I was fishing with my cousins in a different location, but same lake. I was in the water about waist high when all of a sudden a swarm of beautiful fish, bluish green, orange, yellow, swam around me a few times, then disappeared into the water. We all know that this is not normal. I all of a sudden got sad and then scared. I thought of my brother. I got out of the water and went home. I didn't tell anyone what happened. A few days later, I got extremely sick. We went to the doctors and there was nothing wrong with my vitals. I was only getting thinner and thinner by the day and had very little appetite. My parents had to uneng for me. The shaman said that my brother missed me and contacted me. I was afraid of it and lost my spirit. It was not intentional. I didn't tell anyone about what I saw that day in the water. This lake has had many sightings of the dragon that has taken the lives of many people. One sunny day, there was a girl about 14 or 15 years old. She went swimming with her sister and her sister's boyfriend at a lake. I don't know which lake, but her sister and the boyfriend were sitting on the sand doing their own thing while the girl went to sit in the really shallow part of the water. She was just hanging out there when she saw 2 white fishes come up to her and started swimming right around her legs. She thought that they were so pretty and called for her sister to come take a look at them. When her sister came up to her, the 2 white fishes swam away. The sister went back to her boyfriend. The girl was still sitting in the water when the 2 white fishes came back. They were still swimming around her legs and she started to get annoyed. She tried to shoo them away, but they would not leave her. After this, the 3 of them decided to pack up and went home. The next day, the girl got really sick. The mom took her to go see a shaman. The shaman asked her, "Have you recently gone to a lake?" The girl answered yes. The shaman asked, "There were 3 fishes there, right?" The girl said, "No, I only saw 2. The shaman then replied, "There were 3 fishes, but they were really, truly dragons. The boy dragon saw you, and he really liked you. He sent his 2 sisters out to come take you instead." This freaked the girl out. The shaman continued to say, "If you don't want to die, I suggest you don't ever go to that lake again." God damn it, is it Lake Fen, dude? Why do people keep going to Lake Fen? Lake Fen is so messed up. It all started with my recent family vacation to Laos a few months ago, in between March and April of this year. My family and I went around many places with names that I can't recall at the moment, and overall we had a pleasant experience there. That was all until I decided to go on a hike with my cousin Zhe and found a small, deepish cave. We got out to some wood, jungle-like area after driving a bit of distance away from our grand-uncle's house. This side of my dad's family from Laos owned one of those motorcycles you see in the Hmong movies. As we walked around and hiked the area, we knew better than to do those things that our suspicious Hmong OG parents told us not to do in the woods and jungles. I stated that I was a skeptic to evil spirits and stuff, but I still held parts of my culture close to my heart. I treated the hike like a normal walk to the park back in Minnesota. That all changed though when I discovered a cave that I thought was harmless and would be fun to explore. Zhe didn't like the idea of it, but I told them to stop being a wuss and just tag along close, and he eventually gave in, knowing that I would never shut up about it. I would then come to regret this decision later. Upon entering the darkish cave, I found myself intrigued with every aspect of it, like I was Indiana Jones about to stumble across some crazy mound of treasure. By the time I knew, I had lost track of where my cousin was, and I had gone a bit deeper into the cave with my LED flashlight. I yelled out for him, hoping that the echo would bounce far enough to where he could hear me. No response. I was lost and terrified of being stuck inside the closed space, but I tried my best to keep my cool even though I could feel myself slowly breaking inside. As I tried to find my way back the way we entered, I was already now a bit deep into the cave after going into a few different passages within it. I started to feel all these superstitions get to me, but I repeatedly rationalized those thoughts in my head. Suddenly, I thought I heard what sounded like a hyena cackling, a monkey laughing, or something slipping and making a scraping noise. This made me start to walk faster while I tried my hardest to maintain my cool. My back was now full of goosebumps since I felt like something was following me. Now, I'm not sure if I'm crazy, but in the quiet cave, where the only noise was being made was coming from my shoes shuffling on the rock-hard floor, I heard what sounded like stomach growling noises followed by more hyena-like cackling. The thing was that it wasn't my stomach that growled since I had eaten before going on the hike. Suddenly, my LED flashlight with brand new batteries died and I grew super terrified. I clicked my flashlight repeatedly and nothing. I began to panic and breathe heavily and ran my hand against the clunky cave walls for a sense of safety as I ran forward, hoping to find the way out. What I had once thought was just a small-ish cave had now turned into an insane maze, game of cat and mouse between me and whatever that thing was in the cave that was making all that noise and continued to do so as I was in the dark. By some miracle, I found my way back to some familiar grounds. When I saw some sunlight shining through there, I just knew I was getting closer to the entrance. The cackling then echoed throughout the cave, and what I believe were two more of the same sets of cackles followed afterwards. I continued running out of there and headed towards the light, never looking back. When I finally made it out where we entered the cave, my cousin was leaning on a boulder outside, looking at his phone, wondering why I was running out so quick. I jokingly told him that I had a big insect crawl up on me, so I ran out. Apparently, he had been waiting for me for about a minute or two to get out since he figured that I wouldn't go too far into the cave. I shrugged off what happened inside and never told anyone what I witnessed in the cave for the rest of the vacation. The bloodline of my family members always seemed to experience some scary situations. About 5 years back, when my uncle still lived in an apartment in Minnesota, his kids encountered something very strange. The apartment that they lived in was huge, with long dark hallways before you reached their room. My uncle worked a full-time shift in the morning while my aunt worked a full-time shift later when he comes back, so second shift I guess. During that time, she was on the computer next to a glass sliding door. Her kids were just casually playing like they always do. At that time, they had 3 children, all who were under the age of 5. Out of nowhere, the 2-year-old boy got spooked and started pointing at the hallway to the bathroom. My aunt didn't care because he was always a little joker. It seemed like it was normal for him to be doing these things. But then the boy ran to my auntie and started saying that there was a ghost while pointing into the hallway. He didn't know how to speak yet, but he knew the basic words. Then their eldest daughter, who was 4 years old, came along. She said that he was lying. Instead, it was a shadow man with blood all over him. That's when my aunt grabbed her kids and packed up, and they all came over to tell us the story. Many people have said that Mounds Park in Minnesota is haunted, but I don't think so. The rumor is that the place was once used as an Indian burial ground. But that was a long time ago. I kept on bothering my friend to go with me to Mounds Park at night. He always said no because he's afraid that we might see something, or worse, something might follow us home. After a while, I gave up trying to convince him and decided that I would go there alone. When the sun began to set, everyone got into their car and drove home. I was watching a volleyball match, and soon they too packed up and were leaving. I was very bored listening to my iPod, but I know I must stay until 11 so that I can prove to everyone that Mounds Park is not haunted. By nightfall, everyone had left and it was just me with my iPod. From a distance, a man walked over to the edge of a cliff and sat down. There is a steep cliff that leads down to a highway at Mounds Park. I was feeling bored, so I decided to go talk to him. Before I could reach him, I saw his dark figure push itself off and down the cliff. I quickly ran over to the cliff, thinking to myself that, oh crap, he has committed suicide. When I made it to the edge of the cliff, I looked down and saw the outline of his body on the ground. It was bent in a weird way and not moving. I kept thinking to myself that, oh god, he's dead. And I waited and waited, but still no movement from his body. I thought I should call the police and report a suicide, but before I can grab my phone, I heard someone shout from below. The voice of a man yelled, "Hey you, go home." I was already in shock from witnessing the suicide, and I didn't know what to think and say, so I remained silent. "Go home," the man shouted again. "Go home before I come back up there and push you down." The voice sounded like it came right from the spot where the man laid, but there was no one else there except for me and him. It couldn't have been him, I thought. No one would have survived that fall. Still, I said nothing and kept looking down. "I have warned you," the voice echoed up again. "I'm coming up." And I kept on staring at the body. I saw that right after his last statement, the body, which had been perfectly still this whole time, began to move, and it looked like it was slowly trying to stand up. I jumped and ran straight to my car and sped home. I never bothered to report the incident to the police because I'm not even sure what I saw that night. This happened about 5 years ago, when my brother's friend and him decided to go do a bonfire late at Mounds Park in Minnesota. On that day, they said that they remembered seeing some Mexicans having a little party and singing and dancing, but there were no cars. They didn't care and kept on doing what they were doing. About 2 hours later, they had realized that those people were gone, and my brother said that they all remember those people being there. They shrugged it off and kept on doing what they were doing. Around 10 o'clock, they realized that it had gotten very dark, darker than the usual days. Later on, they were laughing and talking until my brother's friend realized someone screaming. They shrugged it off, but as it got more intense, my brother got to the point where he was so annoyed he screamed back. Right when he screamed back, the person who screamed even louder. My brother and his friend got scared and said, "Let's go home." As the two of them got to his car, he could feel a cold breeze and someone standing next to him. They hopped into their car and raced home. As my brother got home, he didn't bother to tell my parents until my other brother got sat on, and my older brother had been hearing knocks and someone running up and down the stairs. My parents always thought we were lying until my brother told my mom what happened, and my mom said, "You weren't supposed to scream back. Screaming back to a ghost is like you're wanting to compete with them." And my mom also said, "You guys went on a day where the dead had risen up." As for my brother's friend, a girl had followed him home. He became very ill, and his parents did a ritual for him and changed his name. They said that he had to go out for 3 days so that the ghost girl won't find him. But instead, he broke the rules and the girl found him again. So, again, they had to do another ritual for him. Wow, talk about a waste of money. In regards to my brother, my parents didn't really care about the ritual until things got more intense. He dreamt of a girl in Hmong clothes and the weather was foggy. He tried to run away from her, but he couldn't, so eventually the lady grabbed his arm and he woke up. He then told my mom, and my mom asked him, "Did you sleep with your arms and legs crossed?" My brother replied with yes. In actuality, you're not supposed to, because if you do so, then you can't run in your dreams. Despite this, my parents still decided to not do the ritual, so my brother had another dream that he was being chased. When he woke up, he said that he could see his wall covered in blood. He screamed and told my parents. This is when they decided to proceed with the ritual. After they fixed him up, things have gotten better. For this encounter, I was not the one experiencing it. I heard about this from a story that my parents told me. Back in Thailand, my sister's best friend had a boyfriend who was very well known for his good looks. I have never seen him, so I don't know if it's true, but he's also a Qing player too. One day, after he came back from playing the Qing for this one funeral, a female ghost was stalking him and bothering him ever since then. The ghost kept on telling him to eat poison so that he could die and still look handsome. It happened for a while, and he refused to take the poison, but he got so stressed out that he finally took it and died. When he passed away, he put his girlfriend's picture on top of his head. I was told that he doesn't look good when he died. He didn't leave peacefully. He came back as a ghost and watched his girlfriend. If any boy would come to talk with her, he'd scare them away and haunt them. The girlfriend got so scared and told her parents. They did Woneng and found out that the ghost didn't want him because he wasn't very handsome anymore. He only wanted her for himself, so that's why the boyfriend came back to watch her. They had to change her name. Man, talk about tragic. Imagine dying and then the ghost girl doesn't even want you anymore because you're no longer handsome. We can't even escape the fact that good looks matter in real life and in the afterlife. I wonder if you get surgery in Korea, you'll look good if you pass away, maybe. About 3 years ago, my little sister was about 12 years old. She would have nightmares and sleepwalk. The weird thing was that her tears kept on falling down as she was crying, but when I asked her, she said that she didn't even realize that her tears were falling down as well. As 1 year passed by, everything was still occurring to her. My parents were worried and finally told a lady to Woneng for her. After everything was done, the lady told my mother this. Your daughter had a past boyfriend that they never had the chance to be together, so now that she was reborn and he wasn't, he comes and stays with her. The reason why her eyes keep crying is that every time he licks her face, tears come out. My parents were shocked and did a bigger Woneng for my sister and changed her name. Ever since then, tears stopped coming out and she could sleep peacefully. I have a short story to share about my little cousin who is 3 years old. He just cut himself on the forehead with a knife the other day. It's from his forehead to the bridge of his nose. Keep in mind that they just moved into a new house, and this happened on the second day or so at the house. His mom asked him why he did it, and he said that, "There's a ghost right there, and it said for me to cut it." I haven't seen him yet, but my mom just told me earlier, and I thought I should share this. Their house just got blessed, so I hope everything is okay. That's scary, man. If they're willing to listen to ghosts, imagine what happens when you give them an iPad and they become an iPad kid. My grandpa told me an event that took place back in Laos. Back then, when his family lived in Laos, they had a farm. To get to their farm, they had to cross over a cemetery of a lady that is a Bodapanjua. They buried her in the woods near the pathway to the farm. My grandpa said that after the burial, she would appear. She would stare at you and sit, and then start walking around. My grandpa said that if she doesn't bother you, then you don't bother them back. Don't stare, don't point, and don't communicate. One night, a family was coming back. The ghost appeared before the family. The dad saw it and started shooting at her with his gun. The spirit followed them home and he got really sick. A shaman came and cured him, but he said that the ghost won't let him off unless they give her a cow because he offended her by shooting at her. They killed the cow and he got better. My grandpa said that the guy lived, but he's still sick. To this day, my grandpa said that if you see something you aren't supposed to see, don't point, don't communicate, don't look at them. If they don't bother you, then you don't bother them. I used to have neighbors who were elders who would always tell us ghost stories and encounters. The one I'm about to tell you is the most significant to me. As they told me, back in Laos, they had this neighbor who were very mean to people. The parents are kind, but the son and daughter-in-law were very disrespectful and unkind to the parents. They did not take care of the parents and would not cook for them, even if they were starving. On the day of their third child, both parents passed away in their sleep. Later that day, all the relatives came to carry the parents out of the house. They carried the mom out first, and then the father. As the relatives made it to the door, the father's hand suddenly rose up and grabbed the side of the door, unwilling to leave. Everyone was surprised as much as being scared as the dead body held on to the door. No matter how hard the man tried to pull his arm down, the father would continue to resist. A shaman in the room said, "It is not physical strength you guys are against. It is the anger and despair of the spirit." The shaman told the son to kneel down and apologize for whatever reason this happened. If he is lucky, after the burial, the son's family will live in peace. A few nights after the burial, right outside of their wooden walls, they could hear very slow footsteps circling their house. One night, when the parents were asleep, they could feel and hear scratches from under their bamboo bed. They begged and begged for it to leave them alone and that they will burn any joss paper that they need. The next morning, their eldest son, 7 years old, told them, "Dad, last night Grandpa was pulling down my blanket from under the bed and said for me not to love you because you didn't love him." My husband and I were on here talking about how fake these stories are because they always describe a little girl in a white dress, and because I joked about it, it came to haunt me later on that night. It was around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. My husband was deep asleep, and I saw a little girl in a white dress with hair covering her face. I thought it was my daughter, so I was about to say something until it hid behind the wall. I then found out that it was a ghost, and once I had that thought, it sat on me, and I couldn't move at all. I could feel it get on top of my bed, walk all over it, and then come back to lay down right next to me. I had my eyes closed because I didn't want to see it. I was afraid that if I opened my eyes, it would be right in front of my face, staring at me. I was so mad, not afraid but pissed off because it felt like forever. Then it stopped. I could finally move again, so I woke up my husband. He didn't see anything or feel anything. It was very inconvenient that it happened when he was dead asleep. I've had a lot of paranormal encounters, but this one stood out the most. When my family and I were moving out to our new house, my brother Gu was lifting his boxes of videos to the car. This guy loved Hmong movies, collecting DVDs and cassettes. If you went to the basement in our old house, you would see 3 closets of cassettes, especially Hmong dubbed movies and Hmong movies. While he was lifting the boxes to the new house, he felt a sharp pain on his lower back. This back pain eventually prevented him from walking normally for 1 to 2 years. He would feel a nerve down on his left leg, and it hurted to the point where he could barely walk or work. One night, he had a dream that he was sleeping, and an old woman came into his room. She grabbed his feet and tried to pull him under the covers and off the bed. Gu remembered feeling all paralyzed in fear as he couldn't speak or move. My parents went to see a shaman, and the shaman said that there was this girl who was a ghost that admired him and really liked him. She would cling her whole body onto his back, which caused him back pains and made him unable to walk well. This scared the crap out of me. I hung out with Gu a lot because we are very close. This girl was probably there while Gu and I were talking. She was everywhere with him. It gives me the chills thinking how she would be listening to our conversations. My parents gave Gu a bracelet and a red, black, and white string necklace. Eventually, after a while, he no longer has back pains and was able to walk normally again. I don't understand how the ghost saw him and came to admire him, and I also have no idea about the significance of the old lady in his dream, but that was what happened. I was always a very curious girl, so I liked to ask my mom for ghost stories that my grandparents passed down. There was a family living in Laos before the war. In the house, there lived a grandma, her kids, and her grandkids. Because of the war, they all planned to move away, but because of transportation issues, the grandma decided that she'd stay and her kids would go. Feeling frustrated, her kids did what they were told. Through a long journey, her kids and grandkids made it to Thailand, but she didn't. Right after they left, she passed away. During her funeral, the people watching her body left to go eat, and no one stayed around to watch her. Suddenly, she rose up from her coffin and left with the bow and arrow thing you see at a dead person's jobli. Funerals are different in Laos for those who don't know. They're held inside the dead person's house, and they leave the corpse inside the house where it lays straight on the ta nung. Basically like a bench or something like that. Back to the story. The grandma rose up from her coffin and ran to Thailand to go after her kids. The relatives came back to an empty coffin. This dead corpse, through its desires, managed to make its way crossing into Thailand. During the farming seasons, children were forbidden to go because that grandma would take them, and if a person wanted to go somewhere, he or she must go in a big group of people because they don't know if they will encounter that grandma. When I was younger, my siblings and I would tug on each other's foot when the other one was laying down or sleeping on a bed, and then quickly hide under the bed to make them think that it was a ghost. One day, during school, I threw up everywhere in the gym, so my dad came to pick me up. When we got home, I ran to go get my toys and went to my parents' and younger siblings' bedroom and started playing by myself under the blanket on the bed, with my feet sticking out. There I was playing peacefully by myself with my dinosaurs and little green army toys. All of a sudden, someone tugged at my foot. I thought it was my brother and sisters messing with me, but then again, it was only me and my dad home. I started laughing and told whoever it was to stop messing with me as I leaned towards the edge of the bed to peek under. When I looked, no one was there. I stopped laughing and jumped away from the edge of the bed. I looked around the room for a sign of someone, but the doors were closed. It was just me in the bedroom. I quickly knew what it was and ran out of the room crying and screaming to my dad. I told him what happened and he grabbed me and we went to the bedroom. My dad looked everywhere, under the bed, in the closet, in the bathroom, but no one was found. This was the first time a ghost had laid hands on me. I still wonder if it was trying to play with me, or if it was trying to hurt me. Ever since then, I never played alone ever again. This took place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My parents bought a duplex on a corner lot in about 1992. I was only 4. Many strange things happened throughout my childhood, and these are the ones that I remember. When my family first moved in, we would often hear people talking in the attic and running around, speaking in Hmong, and kids crying. Sometimes we would hit the ceiling with the broom, or my mom would play Christian songs sang by a famous pastor. The noises would stop, and then continue every day for a while. Eventually, over time, these strange occurrences stopped. On one occurrence, my dad used to work second shift and during the summer. My siblings and I would stay up and wait for him to come home. We lived upstairs in the duplex. We could hear when someone comes up the stairs and opens the door. That night, we heard footsteps coming up the stairway, and then the door would open, and we would all scream that our dad was home. However, we were greeted with an empty doorway. Afraid, we ran and shut the door, locking it. It was only until an hour later that my dad finally showed up. As the youngest kid, I remember I was about 7 years old at the time. My older brother and sisters were in middle school and high school. I was always the first to get home. When I got home, I could hear kids crying. It sounded like a newborn baby crying in the attic. I remember until this day that my mother was telling the baby in Hmong to stop crying and telling him or her that she also loves him too. Ever since that, every day I waited on the stairs until my brother and sister got home before heading into our house. We have a large family, so my dad converted our pantry room into a bedroom. I shared it with my brother. My aunt and uncle came to stay with us from Colorado. It was about 10 a.m., and my uncle asked me if my brother and I were looking for something, since he saw a boy walk into the room looking for something but left eventually. My aunt also witnessed the same thing. Both my brother and I said that it wasn't us. We were grown at the time. Why would we go into the room while they were still in the bed? They shook it off like nothing happened, although they decided to visit my cousins and slept around for the remainder of their stay. I was in high school around this time. I was sleeping in my room one night, but being a chicken, I couldn't fall asleep that night for some reason. I heard my parents' bedroom door open, and I heard what sounded like a couple of creaks like someone was walking through the kitchen. They went to the bathroom but never flushed the toilet. The person then proceeded to head back to bed in my parents' room. About 5 minutes later, I woke up to go pee. There was no pee in the toilet or pee marks around the toilet. My dad was notorious for not lifting up the toilet seat and cleaning up his mess. I went to my parents' room and asked if my dad had gotten up to use the bathroom. Both my parents answered no. I went back to bed but could not fall asleep. Then I heard someone walking closer and closer to my bedroom and sitting on our heater. I got my metal baseball bat and ran out looking for the person, but I found no one. I headed back to my bedroom and eventually fell back asleep. The next morning, though, I got really sick and didn't go to school for a few days. My parents prayed for me and eventually I got better after a few days. One day, my dad was smoking on the back porch. He said he saw a Hmong lady in Hmong clothes walking towards the house. He didn't think anything of it. After a week, he told the guy who lived in the downstairs duplex about this event. My dad asked if he saw a lady walking from the back to the front in Hmong clothes and asked if it was his relative. The guy answered that it could have been his dead aunt, since he was in charge of her funeral and sending her to the afterlife. Eventually, after 18 years of living there, we moved downstairs. Everything calmed down. Everyone got married and we all moved out. A few years ago, my parents sold the house to some people. I hope they never get to experience the stuff that we went through. My grandparents used to live in a very large duplex in Milwaukee. Most of the hauntings happened on the second floor, and it was really cold upstairs all the time. The few times that I went upstairs to look for people and found it empty, I would turn around and run downstairs as fast as possible. It was a hostile environment, and you just knew something was there. One of my aunts had a room upstairs, and she hung out upstairs by herself a lot. She was in her late teens and would often stay up late talking to guys on the phone or watching Tyler Corn. One night, she fell asleep in the living room. In the middle of the night, around 3 a.m., she woke up because the TV static suddenly made a lot of noise. As she groggily looked at the TV, the channels started changing. The remote control was right by her hand, so she reached out and turned off the TV and went back to sleep. Within moments, the TV turned on again, and the channels started changing rapidly, and the volume got louder and louder. She got really scared, screamed, and ran into her bedroom. The adults tried to convince her that TVs have timers and they just turn on by themselves sometimes. Ever since then, she was scared to be upstairs by herself and didn't stay up until late. Another one of my aunts, who was much younger than the one I just mentioned, slept in the bedroom that was located off of the kitchen on the second floor. She would always ask someone to sleep with her in her room. As a kid, I didn't realize it, but the reason why she never wanted to sleep alone was that she always got sat on every night. Not only that, but her bed would actually shake. It would move and vibrate as if someone was violently shaking it. The thing was that no one actually woke up or saw the bed shake for a long time, so none of her siblings believed her. One night, months later, her brother saw her struggling in her sleep and the bed shaking, so he finally believed that she was telling the truth. She moved into a different room upstairs and didn't have any problems with the bed shaking anymore. However, her younger brother, who moved into her room, was just a kid, probably around 10 years or so. When he was upstairs, he would often see a shadow in the corner of his eye, and yet when he turned there was nothing. One time, he saw a blurry figure of an old white woman looking out the window on the second story. Another time, coming upstairs, he thought he saw someone take a right immediately upon entering the kitchen. Thinking someone was trying to sneak into his room, he followed the person, and it was just a black shadow that walked and disappeared inside the open pantry that was right by his bedroom door. He was freaked out and ran downstairs. None of the adults believed him, but all of us kids did. I live in the outskirts of Milwaukee. Not the city, but kind of like the town. It's a suburban area, so the neighborhood I live in is very quiet, reserved, and peaceful. I moved into the house when I was 3 or 4 years old. My older brother was very rebellious growing up. One night, he and my father were arguing back and forth, and I guess he got angry and went downstairs to the basement, slamming the door shut. In the basement, there is a pitch-black area blocked off that nobody ever goes into. It was so dark that if you shined a flashlight into the area, the light beam would just disappear into the darkness with it. On the other side, we had a blocked-off area where the laundry room would be, and we had an old torn-up couch. My brother was still burning off steam, so he just sat on the couch, which faces the dark, eerie area. For some reason, he decided to concentrate on that area, testing his fear. Out of nowhere, a pair of red eyes emerged. The red eyes glared at him with malicious intent. My brother, terrified, ran upstairs so fast and told my mom, but she shrugged it off. One weekend, I was helping my mom in the kitchen while we were preparing for lunch. We have a window right in front of the sink that shows the driveway and the part of our front yard. I was bored watching my mom do the dishes, so I decided to look out the window. As I stared off into our driveway, I saw a pale little boy in a white tucked-in button-up shirt, black ironed shorts. His outfit seemed to have come from a past era. I saw him holding a lunchbox skipping up our driveway. Imagine the boy from the Japanese Grudge movie. That boy looked just like that. I creased my eyebrows together and got off the chair. I told my mom that I was going to get the door. I ran to the front door and opened it, excited to see my visitor. But to my surprise, no one was there. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up and I ran back to my mom. I told her what happened and she told me that it was just my imagination. Another event occurred when I was in 7th grade. It was around 6 a.m. and I was getting dressed, getting ready for school. I was sitting in the living room when I heard a loud cry and whimper coming through the vents and from the open basement door. I was on my phone at this time and laughed, taking it as a joke. I had never heard these noises before. Only after I let it sink in that I was concerned, so I got up with my siblings and we went downstairs to check. We found my little brother crying hysterically on his bed. He told us that there was a little girl in the room with him, telling him that he shouldn't be afraid of her and that she wasn't going to hurt him. This caused a huge commotion and woke up my parents. They came down from their bedrooms and calmed us down. After we said a few prayers, everything got better and calmed down. I still remember that house to this day. Based on a true story. After the month of not being terrified, things started happening only in our room. Someone was playing around in our room, messing around with our toys and belongings. They would move them around and hide them. I knew if I told my parents, they would just say, "You just misplaced them, or maybe you let someone borrow them." So instead, I told my older brother that something is happening, because now my brother and I, who share rooms, is acting funny, but only at night when we go to sleep. So my oldest brother came up with the idea of playing a game of camping in our room. All of my brothers and I would sleep in our room and stay up late until we knock out. And would you know it, nothing happened. So my oldest brother just told me not to worry about it. About 3 days later, my brother started talking in his sleep again, gibbering about something. So I shook him awake and asked him why did he do that. I told him about what was going on, and he said that he didn't dream of anything. He just shook it off and knocked back out. Every night on after that, I would hear little kids running around or hiding from me like peekaboo. I knew that if I could get my brother to believe me, we could tell our parents, so I found my old tape recorder and decided to record it as soon as my brother started talking. Later on that night, I heard gibberish, but it was nothing too solid, but I did record it. For 3 days, that's all I got recorded, so on the 4th night, my brother spoke again. I double-checked to make sure that it was recorded and rewinded it a few times to play it back to my parents. As morning came, I was anxious to show my family what my brother said in his sleep. I came to find out that the tape recorder was gone. I looked and looked around for it and could not find it. I knew someone took it to protect themselves, It broke me down because now I have nothing to prove or get help for my brother. Later that day, as we were playing in the backyard, my brother kept on staring at the neighbor's bedroom window. I then faced to look at it, and I noticed my brother quietly walking back into our house at the corner of my eye. Then, as I focused on my brother, I noticed a dark figure at the corner of my eyes staring at me from the neighbor's window, but it vanished as soon as I blinked. I then knew something was wrong here. I went inside and told my parents everything. They believed me, and when we went to confirm the story with my brother, he was in our room, under the blankets, shivering and pale looking. My parents took him to the dining room next to the altar and said a prayer. My dad called my uncle to come over right now, and when he got here, my brother became really sick again. After a few minutes of doing a few shaman rituals, my uncle said something about a lady that had left our house, but her kids are here now and she wants them back, but they want to stay and play with us. So my uncle then said that we would have to do another ritual and tie strings around my brother and to make him wear different clothes. We invited our neighbors over during the ritual and we sat down to eat. Out of nowhere, the father said that strange things were happening over the past months. Things like objects falling down and someone arguing or talking from their hallway. My parents and family just ignored it, but I knew that they were also scared. After the party was done and we cleaned up, my brother finally talked to me. He asked me where was our video game. He wanted to play it. I told him that someone borrowed it and we will have to get it back next week. My little brother said that he was tired and headed up to the bedroom. My uncle approached me and told me that everything will be okay because that lady has found her kids and they have left, knowing that they were dead and will be together again. My uncle then whispered to me that he knows that they were murdered by the father and were burned alive. I was spooked when he told me that. Later on that night, I went upstairs and heard noises coming up from my room. As I slowly listened, I could hear the video game that my brother wanted to play. I opened our door and my brother said, "Why did you lie to me? I found toys, games, and your tape recorder in our closet behind the clothes." This story was told by my aunt. It took place back in the time when they were still kids, around the 90s. They moved into this house and there was a path road that led to the backyard. It was pretty big and empty. My grandpa would wake up every night to check on my aunts and uncles. One night, the kitchen lights were turned on when my grandpa woke up to check on them. He opened their bedroom doors, but they were deep asleep, so he thought that it couldn't have been them. Since he didn't think of anything, he turned off the lights and went to sleep. Every day and night, they would hear someone knocking on the windows. However, when they would go check, no one was there. One day, the kids were playing hide and seek. Right when everyone went off hiding, my aunt was left hiding in one of my uncle's room. She was hiding right behind the door. They would come in and couldn't find her. Everyone was found except for her, so she came down and yelled at them. One of my uncles would then say that he came in and swore up and down that there was no one in the room. During one night, in that very same room, my uncle got sleep paralysis. Another night, as he was sleeping, he felt like someone was pulling his blanket. When the family was in the living room, they would hear whispers coming from that room. One day, my grandpa asked the neighbors if anything happened in that house before they moved in. The neighbors told him something terrifying. They said that there was a man with a chainsaw in his neck in the closet of a room. That room turned out to be the very same room that my uncle slept in. Right after that, my grandpa decided to look for a different house and they moved out right away. When my family and I first moved from St. Paul to Minneapolis, specifically on the north side, we rented a pretty big house and it was quite nice. It had 6 bedrooms, 2 floors, and there were 2 sets of stairs that we could take to get upstairs, one by the living room and one by the bathroom and kitchen. The stairs, both of them, in my opinion, were the scariest part of the house because what made them so scary was that they were similar to the Japanese horror movie Ju-on, aka The Grudge. Anyways, after months since we moved into the house, my mom and I were not always home because most of the time we would sleep over at my dad's place. My cousins would come over, stay with my brothers and sister, and they would play hide and seek. One night, when my mom and I were gone to my dad's, my cousins and brothers were playing hide and seek tag at night with all the lights off in the house. While they were playing, one of my older brothers was it, and as he looked around the house, going up and down the stairs, he felt as if there was someone following him. He looked back, but there was no one else there. Later on, I think it was him who tagged one of my cousins, and my cousin found someone, thinking it was one of my brothers. He tagged him and said, "Alright man, I got you." And that someone just looked at him with a weird look, like when someone opens their eyes really big and wide looking at you. After that, things just didn't feel right, and they were all kind of getting the chills, so they decided to turn all the lights back on and stop the game. Not long after that, I think, it was once again one of those nights when my mom and I left again for my dad's. When we first moved into the house, my brothers and sisters would always sleep in the living room. On that night, my older sister slept on the couch while everybody slept on the ground. She saw something that was running around in the house. The next thing she knew, she couldn't move at all and felt like there was something sitting on her chest. When she looked, it was a baby, and it said to her that it wanted milk. My sister was scared to death and she just fell asleep. Sometime later, after that happened, she saw the baby again and it said the same exact thing like it did the first time. This time, my sister responded and said that she could not comply to the baby's wishes. The baby then said that it was going to go far away and that it'll never come back ever again. Since then, things were okay for my older sister. As the youngest child and the son of the family, at a young age from 6 to 7, or maybe even 8 I guess, I heard that before we moved into that house, there was another Hmong family who lived there. There was a mother who was pregnant, and from what I heard, she gave birth to one of the kids in the bedrooms upstairs. Unfortunately, that kid didn't make it. I guess that's why my older sister saw the baby and then asked her for some milk. Ever since I found out about that incident, I found out that the house that my family and I moved in and rented was haunted. About 5 to 7 years later, during my 6th grade year, I started sharing a bedroom upstairs with one of my older brothers, the room right across from the room where the Hmong woman gave birth to the baby. In our room, we had a bunk bed, so I slept on the top one and he slept on the bottom one. One night, while I was sleeping, I woke up in the middle of the night in bed. I turned to my right side, which was where the door was, and I saw something standing there by the door. I lifted my head just up a little bit and thought to myself, it's probably nothing, and went back to bed. But then I had second thoughts, so I rubbed my eyes, blinked a few times, and tried to get a better look this time. As I looked, it was a woman in white with long black hair. My heart started beating so fast, and I just got so scared that I had to put the blanket over my head, and I slept like that throughout the whole entire night. The next morning when I got up, I wasn't really sure if I saw it. It was probably just my imagination that got the best of me, that's what I thought. Even till this day, I'm not too sure if I really saw it. In late 2009, my family decided to move back to St. Paul, but this time, most likely to Maplewood. When we were going to move, I was told by my older brother not to mention the word move in Hmong because we didn't want whatever it was to follow us to our new home. So we decided to say go instead of move. After everybody had already moved out of the house, it was just only me and my mom left in the house. There would be times when I would be home alone and I would hear the sound of someone walking on the stairs, but not loudly though, just very faint and quiet. I would get very scared and just play some video games and turn up the volume as loud as I could. Eventually we moved out, but to this day I still have dreams of that house from time to time. My mom used to work for a company located in northeast Minneapolis. She worked with a few Hmong women and naturally became good friends with them. She also worked with this blonde white woman. My mom said that the lady always had problems with her boyfriend and he would show up to work and harass her. One day, the lady's boyfriend showed up to work and they got into a physical altercation and he killed her in the woman's bathroom. I assumed that he was convicted of the murder, but my mom doesn't know. Time passed and their annual potluck rolled around. The building consisted of 2 levels, the ground level, which is the main level where they do all the work, and then the basement, where the offices and lunchroom are located. In order to get to the lunchroom, you have to walk down the hall past all the offices, and the lunchroom is located at the very end of the hallway. It was the end of the day and my mom's friend wanted to grab her big pot that she brought in for the potluck. Often, the managers and supervisors leave for the day and the other employees are all upstairs finishing their work. She made her way down the stairs and as she was walking past the offices, she just so happened to look into one of the rooms for one of the Hmong supervisors and saw the back of the dead lady sitting in a chair. My mom's friend saw this and immediately turned around and ran up the stairs to tell everyone. Well, just her Hmong friends, otherwise everyone else would think she was crazy. She said that she ran up the stairs so fast and skipped so many flights that she almost tripped and fell. Because of this, she decided to get her pot tomorrow morning. After that incident, whenever anyone would go use the bathroom, they would be terrified to go alone. As they sat in the bathroom stall through the cracks of the door, they would see the dead lady who was standing in the bathroom in front of the sinks and mirror, looking at herself and fixing her hair. The company ended up relocating and the building is now being used as a museum. Do you know what the placebo effect is? It's a term coined in the medical field that suggests if you believe strongly enough in a certain practice, magic can happen. For example, if you are depressed and believe beer is going to solve your problem, voila, you just cured yourself of depression. The story I'm about to share comes from a lunchtime conversation between my supervisor and a couple of his subordinates, which include me. I used to work in a large warehouse, and at the far end of this warehouse, there is a small corner room where some elderly Hmong ladies sit to piece together pourers for liquor bottles. One morning, a former employee would come in super early to get a head start on her current task of the day. At this time of the day, the only light on is the safety light to dim the way. There, she sat working away until she heard the far end door open and shut. At this time, she would assume that it was our manager, who is also an early bird, think 6:30 a.m. However, no light came on. Funny, the manager always turned the light on whenever he came in. She brushed this thought aside until she heard the noise again. This time, she walked back to the door and checked. No one was around. She peeked outside, took a stroll around and found nothing. She goes back to the door and in the tiny window, she sees 2 eyes looking back at her. Creeped out, she waits in her car and for everyone to arrive. Now, this was just the beginning of the encounter experiences. Another one of my buddies explained that he would go upstairs to pick items and would hear someone and feel someone breathing on his shoulder. Not too long after that, I started to feel something watching me. I too started to hear noises and bumps around the warehouse where people weren't present. Footsteps, breathing, a tense feeling of paranoia. Whether I'm hearing these footsteps and breathing as a reality was questionable. I guess I believed in the stories so much that they started to become a mental reality. The lesson of the day: don't let paranoia get the best of you. When I was 5, we moved into a 2-story gray house on 35th Boulevard. We had a neighbor who, at night, would cry and scream until very late. In the morning, we would always see him asleep on his front porch. A week after we moved into our new house, he moved out, and the house was boarded up for some reason. I had an older brother who was 8 at the time, 2 twin boys who were 4, and an unborn sibling on the way. As kids, we would often go to that neighbor's yard and play. There was a huge tree in front of the neighbor's garage that we would always climb. A month later, we had our first paranormal experience. One summer day, my siblings and I were playing in the neighbor's yard again. Since no one had moved there after the previous owner left, no one had told us not to play there. As the sun started to set and it began to get darker, my little brother, one of the twins, wanted to go home and started crying. As he cried, I wasn't too sure if others heard it too, but I started to hear other voices crying along with him from inside the neighbor's garage. You know, the cry of little newborn babies that you hear at the hospital? That's how it sounded. One after another, the crying sound got louder. I got scared, so I took my little brother home. After that, we still played there, but I would always go back home before dark. My older brother, though, would stay there until after dark. We stopped playing there after he fell off the tree and broke 2 ribs and his ankle. After that incident, we started to have cats coming into our backyard, making our chickens go crazy every night. In the morning, we would find dead chickens. I remember always hearing my mom curse about how she was gonna kill the cats that would kill our chickens. This went on for a couple of weeks until my dad got fed up with it. They tried putting water-filled bottles around our yard, but nothing happened. One day, my dad decided to camp out and kill the cats that kept killing our chickens. What he saw, though, looked like a black cat, but was a lot bigger than a normal cat. My dad shot at it, but since it was dark and we had bushes against the fence, he couldn't find it, so he left it alone and was going to search for it in the morning. The next morning, wanting to show how cool of a dad he was, he made all of us go into the backyard as he searched for the animal, but came up empty. There was no trace of blood anywhere, but since we watered the ground the night before, we only saw footprints, which looked like small little human feet, but with only 4 toes all over. Things got weird from then on. The last week before summer vacation ended, the whole family slept together in the living room downstairs. We were watching Finding Nemo since it just came out, when suddenly we heard people running upstairs. It sounded like there were multiple people and not just one running back and forth up and down the stairs. My dad went upstairs thinking it was robbers, but no one was there and all the windows were locked. We lived there for almost a year before moving out, and there's a lot more experiences to tell, but it would make this a very long story because our neighbors also experienced similar things and worse. 35th Boulevard, don't go there, guys. This happened in the Minneapolis area. My family moved to this 4-story home, and it was kind of on the ghetto side, but the house was pretty nice. Anyways, I always have one of my sisters sleep with me because I get scared. It's not like I'm going to say that because they'll tease me since I'm the oldest, but it was this one morning where I woke up and my sister, who was supposed to stay with me, was gone. She's an early bird, so she probably went downstairs with the rest of my siblings. I have very bad anxiety and I get paranoid easily. I was chilling on my iPod and then all of a sudden, my door opened. No one came in. It was opened by 2 inches, so there was a little crack. I could see the sunlight coming in, but no one was standing there. I got freaked out, so I said, "Mai, is that you?" There was no reply, and then the door shut itself. I got really freaked out, and it was a what the heck kind of moment. At this point, my anxiety was getting to me, and I know how bad it could get if I got too afraid or nervous. I stood up on my bed, waiting for the next thing to happen. Then, my bedroom door opened again. Still, there was no one. By now, I was afraid something really bad was going to happen. I was ready to scream if anything bad was going to happen, but I could not find my voice. Then the door shut by itself again. I knew then that it couldn't have been any of my siblings, so I called my sister up. I was too afraid to open the door myself. She came in and said, "What?" I yelled at her for leaving me alone when she knew she was supposed to stay with me until I woke up. I asked if it was her or anyone else that was up here. She said no. That's when I crapped my pants, but I grabbed my stuff and ran down the stairs with her. I later told my mom, and she was quiet. My mom also experienced scary stuff because she would get sat on and see stuff ever since she was a child. She didn't say much but told my sister to stay with me until I woke up. I haven't encountered anything after that. This was in 2016 in Minneapolis when it happened. I was overwhelmed with depression and had a hard time figuring out what I should be doing to make things right to make my marriage work. I tried my best to do everything, but it seemed like nothing was ever enough for her. Damn, bro. I had been having a lot of dreams, wandering off into open lands and getting away, leaving everything behind until one morning, I had a visit. The sun was barely rising when my alarm went off at 5:30. I shut it off and laid flat in bed with my eyes open staring at the ceiling. Then, out of nowhere, a lady's voice said, "Son?" I turned my head to the left and saw 6 middle-aged women around their early 40s standing next to my bedside. I took a well-examined look at each and every single one of them, but did not recognize them. I responded in Hmong, "Who are you people?" Then, the lady in a green sweatshirt standing in front of the group with a calm voice said, "We are your grandmas. Don't you want to come with us? We came to take you with us because we saw you crying. Don't be sad. Where we are going, there is no sadness and no worries of life and struggles. It is peaceful and calm. We will be there for you whenever you need us. We will accompany you. Come with us." This lady had the warmest and most calmest voice I had ever heard in my life. The entire time she was speaking to me, she was holding my hand and gently rubbing it like how old Hmong folks do when they talk to you or lecture you about life. Her hand was warm and smooth. Her voice was soothing and sweet. I didn't know her, but I felt like she knew me for a long time. Then a hunch came over me. She's my grandma. My dad's mom passed away when he was 12, so I never knew her. After she finished talking, they all turned around and my room lit up in a blinding white light. They walked into the light and vanished. Yes, the famous white light, but my room was still lit up bright. I thought twice. Should I go? I sat up in bed and stood up. I took one last look at my 3 kids that were sleeping with me, and I saw myself laying there like a lifeless body. An out-of-body experience, if you want to call it that. I turned toward the light where they went in and took a step. Right at that moment, my baby boy let out a cry. I stopped and thought, what the heck am I doing? If I leave, who's going to watch after my kids? I sat back down on the bed and lay back into a lifeless body. I opened my eyes and woke up. I felt a sudden rush of exhaustion and almost puked. My head was ringing, my limbs went numb and my vision blurry, but I fought it. I reached over for the milk bottle and tried to feed the baby, but he didn't want it. Then my daughter started crying like crazy. I thought to myself, what the heck is going on? Was that real? My daughter didn't usually wake up and cry at all. I looked around my room, and the light started fading until my room became dim again. I asked my kids what did they see and why they were crying, but they didn't say anything. My kids were 3 and 2 at the time, the age where kids usually talk a lot. They just held me tightly and didn't say a word until I got them out of bed and made them breakfast. My grandma didn't come back to tell me to go with her after that. I think she knows that I can't leave yet, but till this day, I still feel like she's waiting for me to go stay with her. I feel her presence every now and then. Just a few months ago, I saw her sitting on the chair in my room when I was sleeping, just sitting there, watching me sleep like I was a baby. I was a bit scared, but nope, it's just Grandma watching over me. Plus, whenever she's around, I feel a very heartwarming vibe. Thank you for listening. Subscribe if you haven't already. Goodbye. This happened when I was with my ex and living with him and his family. I lived there for about 8 years and many strange events occurred throughout those years. Here is one incident. My ex's grandmother lived with them for many years. She lived there up until the day she was too sick and had to be placed in a home where there was adequate enough care for her. She was in hospice. The grandmother eventually died in a nursing home in Maplewood shortly after she was admitted. When she was alive and in better health, it was always my son, the grandmother, and myself that was at home. She would always wander around the house. My bedroom was on the lower floor, and directly above my room was my in-laws' bedroom. Sometimes, she would walk around upstairs, particularly wandering around my in-laws' room. The house is old and creaks with every step, so you can definitely tell when someone is walking around. Also, when she was alive, but more towards the end of her life, she would come to my room and open and shut my bedroom door. It was due to her illness that she did that. Anywho, after she passed away, I don't think she left right away. Even though she died in a nursing home, I think she found her way back home. All was normal until her funeral. I started hearing things during the day. At the time, it was just me and my 2-year-old son left at home during the day, but I would hear someone walking around upstairs, just like how Grandma would do when she was alive. That presence would spend a lot of time wandering around the inside of my in-laws' room. Sometimes, my door would rattle. It didn't open and shut the way she used to do it, but the rattling was more than enough. It was frightening because I knew it was just us and nothing else could have done that. I also heard random rattling of items around the house, as if someone was cleaning or rearranging things. When Grandma was alive, she was very restless and would do those things too. I was always very scared, so I would lock myself and my son in our bedroom. The scariest thing I experienced after her death was when everyone was home. I was in the basement alone. The basement was creepy enough because it's old and unfurnished. The house was built in the early 1900s and not much had changed about the basement. There is a bathroom at the far end of the basement near the washer and dryer, but it's kind of hidden by the boiler and all that basement machinery. The washer and dryer are located on the right side of the wall, and the boiler stuff is in the middle, the center of the basement. The bathroom is on the left side of the wall. When you come down the stairs, everything is on the left side of the room. You can see the door of the bathroom when you walk towards that wall, but once you get to the washer and dryer, it gets blocked. Anyways, I was in the basement and I heard someone walk down the stairs. I thought it was my ex because sometimes he would use the basement bathroom. After taking out the dried clothes, I was putting my wet laundry into the dryer when I heard the door open. I knew it was opening because when you open the bathroom door, it creaks. I heard the creaking and that's why I looked up. And there I saw the bathroom door open with my very own eyes. When I had come down the stairs, the bathroom door was closed shut. The weirdest thing is that the door opened very slowly and no one turned the lights on. I waited for a few seconds to see if he would turn on the light, but nothing happened and I didn't hear him anymore. I thought that perhaps he was trying to scare me, so I did the dumbest thing. I giggled and tiptoed to the door, which was wide open now, and looked inside. It was completely dark with no signs of life. All the hairs on my body stood up and I had the freakiest chill run through me. I walked back up the stairs and asked him if he went downstairs. My boyfriend said that he didn't come downstairs at all. I asked everyone if they went downstairs and they all said no. To this day, I cannot find an explanation for that event. Shortly after that, my sister-in-law had a dream of her grandma. In that dream, the grandma said to her that she was going to finally leave. Ever since then, I stopped hearing the walking and the rattling. I don't know if it was her in the basement with me since other strange things have happened before and after her death. But I hope that it was her because I would hate to know that it was something else. This happened about 20 years ago. Myself, my girlfriend, and her friend, her brother, and his girlfriend went out to play pool at TC Billards in Maplewood one night. After we were done, this was around 1 to 2 a.m. in the morning. We went to go start her brother's car and we couldn't open the door for some reason at the beginning. After we got in, the car wouldn't start. Despite having the key in the ignition and twisting it, the car would just not start. After an hour or so, we were magically able to start the car up. We then all looked at each other and said that it was weird. Afterwards, we proceeded to go back to my girlfriend's place. The group got there and we all settled in. Later that morning, her mom came into the room and asked us where we went last night. My girlfriend said that we just went to play pool and came home. Her mom replied, "Well, I was just wondering because last night, it felt as if someone was choking me with that thing you locked the car with. And then your baby was crying, so I got up to make him a bottle and I saw you standing at the other end of the hallway. I called your name and told you your baby was hungry, but you didn't respond to me. As I walked closer to you, you started walking towards me, but slowly. Your face was changing. When I got right up to you, all I saw was a red head, no eyes, nose, mouth, or any other features. So I just made the baby's bottle really quick and went back to my room. Just don't tell your dad. Don't tell him anything about this." I was awake the entire time to hear the whole thing. My girlfriend came back to bed and was afraid. Her brother also heard the story and we all kept our mouths shut. Later on, we all sat down to have some breakfast. Then her dad sat down. He was about to dig into his food, but stopped in his tracks. He looked at all of us and said, "Who brought the redhead home with him?" We all froze. My hair was standing on end. My girlfriend then asks, "Dad, what are you talking about? What redhead guy?" Her dad said, "That redhead guy standing there in the corner." At this point, I was scared but just had to look. I turned my head to the corner of the room and I saw nothing. None of us said a single thing to him, and he knew what it meant. Interested in sharing your stories? submit them to HmongChronicles@gmail.com or in the description below. Here is the next story. Thank you. When I was 8 years old, I started to see dead people. When I would see them, I would believe that it was just my imagination. My parents had their divorce the year before, so I thought maybe it may have been a way for me to plead for more attention. During that time, my dad, my brother, and I had just moved back to Minnesota from Cali because my dad could not find a job there. When we got back to Minnesota, we had to move in with our cousins. They had no children at this time. We were living with them in their home in Maplewood, Minnesota. My older brother had his own room, and my dad and I shared one together. But there were times where I would go sleep with my brother because either I was scared or he was to be alone at night. The house had a washer and dryer in the basement. Every weekend, my brother and I would do our laundry together. One day, as I was putting our clothes into the dryer, my older brother decides to run up the stairs screaming, saying all sorts of things like there was a ghost in the basement. As he ran up the stairs, I screamed back at him, "Don't leave me, I'm scared." My brother replied, "If you don't put the rest of the clothes in the dryer, then I'm gonna block the door and leave you in the basement." And so, he ran off. Wow, that's tough. After I put both of our clothes into the dryer and turned it on, I started walking to the stairs. I had this feeling that I was being watched over. I looked around my surroundings but could not find anything. I wasn't scared of the basement because it didn't look dirty and old like some basements. As I continued walking, I felt a chill down my spine. Suddenly, I heard a woman's giggle. This time, for some reason, I had the feeling that whatever it was above me, and so I looked. I saw a white humanoid figure crawling on the ceiling. It had no face and no clothes. It was practically naked. As I stared at the figure, a mouth started to form where the head was. Eyes suddenly appeared, and then dark black frizzy hair started to grow from its head. Its eyes were bloodshot and locked onto me, and then it smiled. As it smiled, its tongue came out, hanging down, and its eyes started to bleed, and this creepy laugh started to come out from its mouth. This laugh echoed in my mind. It laughed for what felt like hours, and then I finally snapped back to reality and ran up the stairs. I told my father about what happened, but he just told me that perhaps my eyes were playing tricks on me. After that, I never saw that lady or whatever it was again. However, at night, I could hear its laughter through my brother's air vent in his room. I never told him because he's a wuss and there was a probable chance of me getting beat up for it. After 1 year of living there, my father moved us out. 5 years later, I went back to visit my cousins and slept over. I saw that creature or thing again in the kitchen. She was sitting on a chair, staring at me, smiling in the dark. I did what I usually do, which was look away and ignore it. Ever since then, we don't go to that house anymore. I mean, I wouldn't go either. My aunt and uncle attended a funeral for one of my uncle's family members. It was at the Legacy Funeral Home in Maplewood, Minnesota. They were in line to eat when they noticed two guys wearing traditional Hmong clothes in line with them, but no one thought of anything because it was a traditional funeral. My aunt also didn't think of anything either, until she dropped a piece of meat under the table and went to pick it up. When she lifted up the plastic table cover, there was another guy under there, dressed just like the two Hmong people in Hmong clothes. He was licking the piece of meat that dropped to the floor. She was so scared that her face turned pale. That's when my uncle asked her if she was okay, and she said no, so they soon left. As soon as they got to the stoplight, she told my uncle what she saw. Later on, when they got home, my uncle had to bleed to call her spirit back. Boy, do I have a story for you. Where do I even start? Let's see. How about the beginning? That's always a good place to start, isn't it? It was a nice and warm Saturday evening, and I had just gotten done playing soccer with my friends. As I crushed my water bottle after depriving it of its last drop, my friend Thu called out to me. He was wondering if I was down to study at his place. I thought, why not, because we actually had a pretty big test coming up in school. The sun was beginning to set as everyone was heading their separate ways. Thu's house was quite a walk away, unfortunately, and the quickest way was to follow the state trail. It was a trail that literally ran across the state behind backyards, forests, and around lakes. I told them we had to hurry before it gets dark, and so we headed out. Down the trail, into the goddamn forest. After walking for a while, we, of course, pulled out our phones and started to catch Pokemons left and right. We were laughing and going crazy over all the Pokemons that were appearing. It wasn't long before my phone notified me that it was at 15% battery. I told Thu, and he told me that his phone just died minutes ago. I thought it would be wise to save my phone battery, so I turned it off. I looked up at the sky, and my first thought was, it got dark really fast. Like, really fast. The sun was barely above the horizon. I looked at Thu. You could tell he was a little scared. I guess he wasn't used to being out in the dark. I was also beginning to think that he just wanted someone to walk him home. I didn't mind though. I asked him about how soccer was earlier, and we laughed some more. That's actually not a bad idea. Like, if you're scared to go home alone, just tell one of your buddies to go with you and tell them that you guys are gonna go Pokemon hunting. Suddenly, a breeze roughly blows past us. It didn't feel like any normal breeze that you would take for granted or barely notice. This breeze was sudden and violent. We stopped dead in our track. Did you want to go the other way? Asked Thu. Nah, I'm fine. Why? I replied. No reason, he answered. Let's hurry. He starts walking ahead at a faster pace than before. I just wanted to get to his house before the sun officially falls beneath the horizon. I quickly followed him. We walked in silence for a while. Then it hit me. There was a funeral home coming up on the trail. Crap. That must have been why Thu asked me if I wanted to go a different way. At that moment, I wanted to say, you know what, let's actually go back the other way. But you know, us guys, we let our pride get the best of us. And honestly, if I had said that, I think I would have spooked the two of us even more. So I kept my mouth shut and we continued walking. With each step we took, the funeral home was coming more and more into view. It started with its beige corner peeking out from between the branches. A few more steps and you could clearly read the words funeral home, which ran along the top of the building. I peeked at the horizon. Crap. All that was left was the soft golden glow upon the clouds. The sun had officially sunk. With a low hum, the streetlights turned on. It honestly didn't help us much because we were on the state trail. Only about every half mile or so, we would see a streetlight at an intersection. Hey, said Thu. Yeah, what's up? Do you believe in ghosts? Was this dude crazy? I wanted to smack the soul out of him right there and then. We hadn't even officially reached the funeral home yet and he's asking me such a question. Bro, I don't think now is the right time to ask that, I warned him. I didn't say anything back. We reached the back of the funeral home and we both stared as we quickly walked by. I even held my breath. As soon as we walked past it, I knew we'd done messed up. Oh lordy, we messed up big time. The moment we walked past that building, I could tell. I could tell she was behind us. I could tell she was matching us step for step. I could tell she was following us. Out of the corner of my eyes, I saw that Du knew too. We weren't alone. Not anymore. I quickened our pace with Du quickly matching up. Hey, what's up? Asked Du. Oh, nothing, I lied. My legs are just kind of tense, you know. I have to get the blood flowing again. Oh yeah, me too. I'm really tense. My heart was beating faster than it ever did. Soccer was nothing compared to this. I didn't want to look back. I didn't need to. A few minutes later, I felt something that I will never forget. Cold puffs of air were running down the back of my neck. I then start to dramatically swing my torso, elbows out, left and right, left and right. I looked as if one of those people who did fast walking, except more hardcore. What are you doing? Asked Du. Nothing, man, I lied again. I just felt my back tensing up. I thought I'd stretch it too, you know. That beam of light gave Du and I the greatest boost of courage ever. I looked at him, and we both began to chuckle lightly. It quickly turned into a great big hearty laughter as we continued walking. At that moment, I thought to myself, screw it, I'm not afraid of you, dumb ghost. I quickly turned my head around and there was nothing behind us. Was it all in my imagination? Up ahead was an intersection, and we saw the faint glow of a street lamp. Our laughter still roared through the forest as we walked. Then it happened. My phone died. Our once courageous laughter slowly turned small and frail. We then started to hear a small laughter that escalated louder and louder. It became high and shrill and was the worst thing that I have ever heard. I yelled out and the two of us bolted towards the intersection. We were screaming at the top of our lungs. Our lungs were burning and it felt as if they were going to break in half any second. I had never ran so fast in my life, not even in soccer. How we made it out safely, I will never know. We collapsed under the lamp's heavenly beam of light, our eyes never leaving the direction in which we came. It was pitch black. I remember hearing the faint laughter from deep inside the forest. We then got back home safely and his grandfather did a few quick spells of protection on us. I slept over that night. Ever since then, nothing really happened to us, at least not yet. Sounds like a crazy homeless person. Maybe they wanted to play Pokemon Go too, you know? Anyways, thank you for listening, subscribe. I know many of you Hmong people who live in Minnesota probably go fishing there every year. The lake borders Minnesota and Wisconsin. My whole entire family loves to fish. Even during the winter time, they still go ice fishing. I will tell you 3 events that happened to us at Taylor's Fall. The first event. I was still in elementary school in 4th grade. It was a weekday, so my parents decided to tell me to not go to school and go fishing with them the next day. I was like, yes, no school for me. We woke up early in the morning and we got there at 5 a.m. We were the only people there. We fished there until the afternoon. After some fishing, we were able to fill up half of our entire cooler. Then I started to get bored of fishing, so I decided to take a nap on a bench. All of a sudden, something was happening to my mom and dad. I don't know exactly what happened, but they just woke me up so fast and told me to pack our things and get to the car. They told me that we were going to go to the gas station. And I was okay with it because I was pretty hungry at that time. After that, we left the lake and went to the gas station, and then went straight home. I asked my dad what happened. Dad, I thought we were going to fish the entire day. He replied, just be quiet and go to sleep. You don't know anything. When we got home, I asked him why we left so early. We usually fish until around 7 to 8 p.m. My mom told me, right after I went to take a nap, around 30 minutes or so, my dad caught a fish. But for some reason, he couldn't reel in his line. He tried so hard, but he couldn't get the line, so he cut it off. Then, he saw a head of a woman peek up, looking halfway at my dad, and it went back down. The second event. I was in middle school in 7th grade. It was spring. my family and cousins decided to have a picnic on a Saturday. Everyone was enjoying the beautiful, nice weather. Guys were fishing, kids were playing games, and mothers were chit-chatting. The day went by. Everyone left home at around 7 p.m., but my parents, my brother, and I decided to stay longer to fish. By then, it was 11 p.m., and we still didn't leave yet. It was pretty dark in our area. The only lights we had was the full moon on the water, light bulbs, and 2 lanterns. Then, all of a sudden, a wolf started to cry during the full moon. We saw 4 white eyes looking at us. My brother asked me to flash the flashlight. I was so scared, I didn't want to do it and almost peed my pants. So I turned on the flashlight and, thank God, it was just 2 deers. The deers ran off. Then, after about 5 minutes, we saw 2 red eyes from about 50 feet away from where the deers were. I flashed the light and saw nothing. However, we still heard the howl of the wolf. Then we started to hear what sounded like footsteps walking by and stepping on small branches coming down from the mountain. In our heads, we knew that there were no one else but us. The red eyes, we could still see them in the dark. We saw them on top of the cliff. We could just barely make out what seemed to be a shadow of a person. After that, we all got scared and didn't want to say anything. We just packed our stuff and left the lake in a hurry. Third event. I was a sophomore. We usually go camping there every year during Memorial Weekend. It was a year after my uncle had passed away. It was Friday, and we left in the afternoon to the campsite. We couldn't go camp there until 3 p.m., so we decided to fish for a while. There were more than 10 tents that were already set out. Our whole entire family and some cousins decided that they wanted to join us. It was getting dark, and so the ladies started to cook. The kids got some branches for the night to cook and warm all of us up. And then some of the guys were setting up the tents for us to sleep in. After we ate, we were just chilling for a while. Then my cousins started talking about my deceased uncle. We missed him, and he usually came to hang out with us. Unfortunately, now he's not here with us. It's been a year now, and we wanted to see how he was doing. Then we all started joking around. Better stop talking about him or he will pay you a visit tonight. After a long chit-chat, it was around 9 p.m. Everyone started to head to bed. I went to sleep but woke up in the middle of the night. I didn't know what time it was, but the fire was still alive. I opened up the tent to peek if anyone was up, but I didn't see anybody, so I decided to go back to sleep. But for some reason, I just could not fall back to sleep. My eyes were still wide open. Out of nowhere, a branch hit the top of my tent. It wasn't like it fell down from a tree, but instead someone threw it on top. At this point, I was getting kind of scared, but I had to be brave, so I brushed it off. About 5 minutes passed by. I saw a shadow or figure of a man walk past in front of my tent from the left. This immediately made me jump, and I was thinking that perhaps it was my brother-in-law going to get something from the car. My sister and brother-in-law pitched a tent next to mine on the left side. So this was my reasoning, and I decided to close my eyes and pray to God for 10 minutes and fell asleep. The next morning, it was 7 a.m. I asked my brother-in-law, "Hey, did you wake up to get something in the car last night?" He responded, "No, I was dead asleep the entire time. Why do you ask?" I was immediately shaken. I replied, "Well, because I saw a figure of a man walk past my tent last night. I thought it was probably you." After that, I went and asked everybody, but they all said no. After everyone went to bed last night, no one got up and came out of their tents at all. It was until 5 a.m. that some of the guys decided to wake up and go fishing in the morning. My cousin, who slept 50 feet away from us, woke up pretty late and they started to pack to go home. We asked them why they were already packing to go home. It's only Saturday and we weren't planning to go home until Monday. My cousin then said that last night they heard someone walking around their tent constantly, but their parents were too afraid to peek, so they asked one of the sons to peek. When he peeked outside and unzipped his tent, he didn't see anybody. However, that night, they heard what sounded like growling, like the growling of a tiger in the woods. When they woke up, they saw footprints going around their tent. The parents asked the kids if they were doing pranks on their parents, and the children said no. The kids were also terrified and said that they heard the same thing too, so they quickly ate lunch and left. They never came back to the lake to hang out with us on the extra days. My mom said that it was probably my deceased uncle who came to pay a visit since we were talking about him last night, and that we all missed him. He probably missed us too. I was lucky to see his figure because no one else did. He was probably the one who threw the stick onto the tent because he knew I was the only one awake and was warning me that he was here with us. Believe it or not, my buddy and I were fishing at night at a local lake that we hardly ever visited before. This was in the summer of 2012. I was the skipper and my buddy was navigating with a spotlight. We started fishing at around 9 p.m. That night we caught a lot of fish, but we were just fishing for fun. As the night got longer, it got cold and I was wearing a t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. My buddy was also wearing the same thing, except he was wearing a sweatshirt. I had 3 life vests on, so I told my buddy to wear the vest to at least give him some insulation, but he said that he was fine. I got my vest and put it on to keep me warm. It helped a little. The night was calm and there was no moon out that night, so it was pitch black except for the navigational lights and the fish finder. As we were fishing, I got my line stuck in some rocks or something. I kept yanking and pulling, but the line would not break. I only brought 1 pole, so I didn't want to lose too much line. I used a device to help me free my line. I tried to free the snag, but it didn't give. I was about to cut my line when all of a sudden, a strong breeze hit the boat, and the boat almost tipped me over. After that, I heard a thump on the bottom of the aluminum boat. I couldn't see what it was that we hit. My buddy was still sitting at the back of the boat laughing at me because I almost fell into the water. He felt a bite on his line and he set the hook. It was something big. Whatever he caught wasn't fighting much though, but it was definitely big. As he continued fighting his catch, I was still trying to unstuck my line. I finally gave up and decided to cut the line. I went in and grabbed the net to help him with his fish. He said that it must be a catfish because it's heavy and it's not jumping like a bass. As he kept reeling in his line, we finally caught a glimpse of the thing that he caught. It was a black button-up shirt. I started to laugh at him because he caught a shirt, and I just laughed and started to talk about how people actually drowned in this lake. Some of the people that drowned were never found. As the night got longer, I was starting to get tired and so was my buddy. We decided to call it a night and go home. I was driving and he was holding the spotlight. He pointed the light ahead of the boat so I could see where we were going. On the way back, the boat engine kept having a lag. I was wondering why, but it was moving, so I just kept on driving. Out of nowhere, we saw something we could not explain splash in front of our boat about 30 yards or so. I slowed down and put the boat on idle. I asked my buddy if he saw what I saw, and he shook his head yes. "What was that?" I asked. He looked at me and said, I don't know, but it looked like a large snakehead with the long neck and body of a bird or seal. I shook my head, agreeing to his description. I put the boat into full throttle, even though the speed limit after sundown was only supposed to be 5 miles per hour. When we got to the launch, I backed up the boat trailer and proceeded to put the boat into the trailer. I had my buddy sitting in the driver's seat so we could get out of there ASAP. I drove the boat onto the trailer, but there was something wrong. It wouldn't move forward. I was wondering what could be wrong. Did we run out of fuel? I went to check the fuel tank and it still had plenty of fuel. I tried tilting the engine, but it would tilt up. Dang, Did the hydraulics fail on the engine tilt? I listened carefully and could hear the lift trying to move, so it must not be the hydraulics. I got out and manually pulled the boat up to the trailer and winched the boat onto the trailer. I got back into the truck and my buddy drove up the ramp. Then we stopped so we could strap the boat down. As I walked towards the boat, I saw blood running down the ramp. I freaked out and yelled. I turned to look at my buddy, and he was shaking and pale like he had seen a ghost. I went to the back, and that's when I understood why my buddy was shaking and looking pale. I must have looked and felt exactly what he was feeling now. What we saw was a dead body caught on my engine's lower unit. The body was all bloated with white skin. The blood was coming from being dragged up the ramp. His clothes were all covered in green moss and algae. There were multiple lines and hooks on the corpse, but there was a line that looked very familiar to me. It was my line that I lost that night. I was using a 12-pound blue tri-lined extreme fishing line with a Yamato watermelon red and black flex Senko. The line that I was trying so hard to pull loose was stuck onto the corpse's leg. I guess what happened was some of the lines got caught onto the motor and we pulled him out wherever he got stuck at. We called 911. The sheriff and the ambulance came. They checked his pocket and the corpse was the body that they were searching for 3 months ago. After this, they called the family. It turns out he and some friends were ski boating and they got into an accident. He flew out the boat and so did several others, but he was the one that they couldn't find and rescue. The driver was drunk, so he hit another oncoming boat. The other boat had people that got seriously injured, but they were reported to be fine. The other 4 passengers on the ski boats were also fine, except for the guy that the sheriff department couldn't find 3 months ago. I told my friend, "That's why you need to have your life vest on." I told this story to some of the elders, and they said that perhaps a Ja came and took him. What we saw that night, lurking in the waters, was probably a Ja. This story was from a friend of mine, which I will tell from his point of view. My sister's friend and her boyfriend decided to go fishing one night. It was a typical chilly night in autumn, which was a bit foggy up in the hills. Going fishing at night isn't something crazy, because we all know how crazy guys are when it comes to hunting and fishing. The location was just a slightly small hill which a river flowed through. As they fished, the night seemed to get colder, so they decided to cuddle up in the car. As a couple would do, they went to the backseat to create warmth. As they were fooling around, it seemed as if the fogs were getting thicker. All of a sudden, they both felt this unpleasant, uneasy presence among them. They both looked at each other in the eyes as if they could read each other's mind. Then, the pair looked into the rear view mirror. Surprised, they see this blurry figure of a man appearing from the woods. Scared and traumatized, their natural instinct was to stay as quiet as possible, so the two kind of froze in their car with their eyes following the man. As the figure moved closer, they realized the figure was wearing a camouflage outfit of a hunter. They could see them right by their window. All of a sudden, it looked straight into the car from the other side of that fragile window. Strangely enough, he didn't have a face, like how in the movies when they blur a face out. But through that clear and fragile window, they could make what seemed like the man was confused, like he didn't see them. The figure circled around their car, looking and peeking through every possible window, ready to snatch anything that moved. After a few minutes of searching, the figure gave up and disappeared into the fog. About an hour later, they decided to drive back home and sleep at the closest hotel. The next morning, he checked his phone and saw about 70 missed calls and countless text messages. When the boyfriend called his family back, this is what the sister said. Dude, where the hell were you? Dad had a bad dream about you and it woke him up in the middle of the night. He was up all night doing rituals to shield you from whatever he dreamt about. Hurry home." Hi there. I was reading a post earlier about Lost Lake and just wanted to share my experience there when I was younger, at around 6 or 7 years old. I was living with my single mother, and every other weekend, she and her friends would always go there to have picnics and barbecues. I would always go with her because I had no one to babysit me. Anyways, I was fascinated by this lake. I would always walk towards the lake first thing when we arrived there. My mother would tell me not to go near it, but like any other curious child, I didn't care. I was squatting and splashing the water and remembered that it was a very nice day. It was perhaps around the mid-70s with a slight breeze and the current was pretty strong. All of a sudden, I fell in. I was wearing a heavy dress, so the water made it twice as heavy being soaked in it. Luckily, when I fell in, I was able to grab a hold of the grass. I used all of my strength to clench onto the grass, and that helped me by not getting dragged by the current. It was absolutely amazing how the grass was strong enough to stay planted to the ground. I then felt a pair of hands grab my wrist, and I was thankful because I thought it was my mom. But instead, I looked up to see this preteen girl. She looked to be, at the oldest, 13 years old. She was super pale with a tint of blue, and her face had a big crack in it, like those scary porcelain dolls. I just stared at her and the world seemed to disappear slowly. Then she slowly faded away, and in her place was my uncle. He grabbed me and took me back to my mom. Of course, I got into a lot of trouble that day and had to stay in the car the rest of the trip. There can be good ghosts too at Lost Lake. In January of 2012, I went fishing with my 16-pound dog Mossy. It was a cold and cloudy day. When we got there at the San Joaquin River, there was no one there, so I decided to explore the place a little and started walking away from where I parked. I came to a spot where there was a fallen tree in the river. Usually, fish loved places like that, so I decided to fish there. At around 4 p.m., I started to have all kinds of negative thoughts and started to feel an unusual chill. I reeled in my fishing line and started packing and ready to go back because there was no fish and the sun was setting. I said to my dog Mossy, "Let's go, Moss." As I reached down to grab my stuff, I heard a voice call my name. It was the voice of a man. I thought maybe it was just the birds, and because I have so many negative thoughts and feelings, it was just playing mind tricks on me. I looked and saw that my dog already took off, and she was already at least 25 feet away into the grassy trail where we came from. I quickly followed her. The moment I started walking, someone called my name. The second time, it was so clear to me. I didn't run but walked after my dog without looking back. I don't remember anyone passing me by that day, and there was no way other people can get to that spot or beyond without bumping into me first. It was a very unusual experience. I cannot say that it was a ghost or anything of that nature. 3 weeks ago, on the Merced News, there was a family who went there and found some old human bones. They recorded the whole things with their phone. On the news, they said that the place was an old native Indian burial site. And they said that it's not a surprise to find human bones around there. Anyone in the Merced area with a link to that video, please do share.